Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Toldot, generations. That is the title of this week's Parsha. Generations whose stories were intertwined, generations who did not always understand each other, or see life from the same frame, or understand the previous generation. Generations who passed down trauma, not out of cruel intent, but because the pain was so deeply imprinted on their souls that they did not recognize it, that it was something to heal. Generations. Is that how long it will take to heal from this terrible war? I want to talk today about certainty, uncertainty, and trauma. Part 1, certainty. The massacre of October 7th paused massive protests that had divided Israelis for months. Overnight, the country went from the most divided it has ever been to an Am Echad, a people coming together to defend each other, to return from foreign travel to fight in the war, to serve, to volunteer, to provide services that the government has not been doing. Networks, listservs, social media platforms that had been used to organize protests against the judicial reform turned into networks to bring people together, to feed people, to fill housing needs of people fleeing from the south and the north. A people divided became a people united overnight. This past Tuesday in D.C., the mall captured the unification of 300,000 people from the left to the right to the center, coming together from around the United States to stand in unison with the people of Israel. Like many others who attended the rally, I felt it was critical to be there, to show up for a country I love, a country that has given me as a Jew a security that previous generations could never have imagined. I showed up for the 240 souls who are somewhere buried in Gaza, to chant together with 300,000 people, bring them home. I showed up to send the message to my dear friends and teachers in Israel that I see their pain, I feel their pain, and I am with them. I showed up because college students around the country have faced terrifying anti-Semitism. I showed up to feel Jewish unity, and I felt it, and it was powerful. The one constant that I have felt over the past 43 days has been that I am certain that I stand with the Jewish people. I am certain that there is no justification for October 7th. I am certain that there is a larger regional crisis that Israel is fighting, that Hamas are a danger to Israel and to the Palestinian people. I have also felt certain that watching the pain of thousands of Palestinian civilians that fled from the north and then from hospitals and then buried their own children by the thousands is a humanitarian crisis. I have felt certain that my heart must remain open to the suffering of others, even as I support Israel's right to defend herself. The pictures in the New York Times this past week inside Al-Shifa Hospital were devastating. No beds, no disinfectant, no pain medication, no fuel. I had life-saving surgery 4 weeks ago, and I barely made it through the night without morphine. I cannot imagine the trauma that is happening not only to children, but to innocent civilians who have not had an election, a chance to change the course of leadership in Gaza for nearly 20 years. I am certain that this moment is also a disaster for the Palestinians. I am certain that Hamas must go. The atrocities of October 7th are beyond what any of us can bear, and Hamas continues to commit crimes against humanity by holding 240 people hostage from 33 different countries: Jews, Christians, Hindus, Muslims. I am also certain that Israeli settlers have taken advantage of this moment of crisis and have committed terrible atrocities against Palestinian farmers. Part 2, uncertainty. I am uncertain about the path forward. How will two people live intertwined with each other, as I believe they must, in two states side by side? How will anyone heal from this trauma? How do we find courageous leaders on both sides that are willing to build a real future? A future that will guarantee Israel's security and the Palestinians a life where children can go to school, entrepreneurs can imagine and create, a leadership that sees that this way of constant war does not lead to life. Obviously, I don't know the answers to these questions, and neither do you, or anyone who claims to. Our world has us caught in sides and binaries and accusations and assumptions, dumbing down years of history of complexity into 30-second bites, video screens that go viral. And what we need more than ever is to lean into our humanity, to lean into our ability to see beyond our aching hearts and to find our partners and to believe that one day we will have to help in the healing of this terrible trauma so we can reach a new place. Parker Palmer, in his book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, writes about the importance of learning how to stand and act in what he calls the tragic gap. He says if we want to hang in for the long haul with birthing a better world, on one side of the gap are the harsh and discouraging realities around us. On the other side is the better world we know to be possible, not merely because we wish it were so, but because we have seen it with our own eyes. We're surrounded by greed, but we've seen great acts of generosity. We're surrounded by violence, but we've seen people make peace. The tragic gap, he says, will never close once and for all, a fact that can lead us into despair and resignation. But he says if we recall the ample evidence that the better angels of our nature are still with us, we are more likely to keep working at making the world a better place. Part 3, the tragic gap and healing from trauma. This seems to be the work. I want to acknowledge how hard it is in this moment of self-defense and grief and trauma to think of getting up and moving on, and perhaps right now we can't. Of peace work and bridge building. For some of you, that is not possible right now. But even in the grief and fear, we are obligated to keep ourselves open to the future we must build, the future of peace. Some of you are not ready, but some of you are. You're ready to jump into peace work right now. That feels like the paradigm that we must build to heal this terrible situation, and you will lead the way for us. We can't all be in the same place, and that's actually okay. If you're fighting for your existence, you can't necessarily turn around and get up and walk on. But we also should not be attacking each other for where we find ourselves right now. We will have to eventually heal from our trauma in order to create new life. That is the lesson that Yitzchak teaches us in this week's Parsha. Over the last two Parshiot, Yitzchak was offered on the altar by his father with a knife being held over his face before an angel finally stopped the terror and told Abraham to stop. Some Midrashim tell us that Yitzchak lost his good vision because of the tears that his father wept in his own eyes on that very altar. He comes down from Har Moriah, the place of his pain and trauma, and he finds that his mother has died. This after having experienced the loss of his beloved brother Yishmael. Healing begins for Yitzchak when he meets Rivka and brings her into the tent of his mother, finding love after trauma. Rivka is barren, and we learn in chapter 25 Vayetzer Yitzchak l'Adonai l'nechoach ishto. Ki akara hi v'ye'ater lo Adonai v'taher Rivka ishto. Isaac pleaded with God on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and Adonai responded to his plea, and his wife Rebekah conceived. In a gorgeous midrash that Rabbi Yalkut showed me on this verse, from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, the midrash says, Rabbi Yehuda said Rebekah was barren for 20 years. After 20 years, Yitzchak took Rebekah and went with her to Mount Moriah, to Har Moriah, to the place where he had been bound, and he prayed on her behalf concerning the conception of the womb. And the Holy One, blessed be God, was entreated of him and said, Isaac entreated the Lord. Isaac, after having found love and nurture, returned to the place of his pain, of his trauma, and he prayed for new life in that very place where his life was to be taken. This is the Torah for us. I don't know how we'll get there, and I don't know when, but I pray to God that we will live the Torah of Yitzchak and live beyond this trauma and find life once again. May God watch over the hostages and bring them home, and may God create a pathway to peace. Amen.